Hi, and you're listening to the Mind Fruit podcast, bringing you mental health and well-being promotion to help you live your best life.
All information discussed on this podcast is research and evidence-based. However, is ultimately the opinions of the Mind Fruit podcast, and this is not a substitute to seeking professional medical advice.
Hello everyone, it's Con and Fran here. We hope you've had a good week and are ready for Wellbeing Wednesday. Today we're going to challenge you to find the time to engage in something you enjoy. I'm going to play guitar, and if I know Fran, she'll probably do some colouring while watching a stream on Twitch.
Too right, I will. That's the thing with me, guys. I'm very predictable. When I find something that works for me, that's it. I'll use it regularly. I have to remind myself to try new things every now and again, as you never know, eh?
Yeah, if you find something that works for you though, we'd recommend to use that strategy or activities in times of need. But we'd encourage you to mix it up and try new things, perhaps when you're feeling well, so the result of it doesn't hold so much weight.
Today we're going to be talking about social interaction and touching on relationships. Both these aspects are a massive part of our life day to day, and it's one of the things that have been impacted the most during lockdown. Therefore, I thought it would be a useful topic to discuss. Carl, do you want to start us off on social interaction?
Yeah. So the importance of social interaction, man, where do I start? It's a big topic, isn't it? It's one of those things that makes human life so dramatic. We're just kind of bumping into each other, sending on each other messages all the time, you know. The fact that everyone feels as though they feel they need to celebrate the easing of lockdown says it all. We need that interaction. We went to the park today, didn't we? And it was amazing just to see people having picnics and just people living life.
Yeah, definitely.
Having those interactions. It can make us feel so many things, can't it?
Yeah.
Like the way we communicate to people, like the one thing I'm going to point out is it's very personal and individualised. My social needs are completely different to Fran's, aren't they?
Yeah.
And my intentions for social interactions are different too. We all have those different expectations, what we want from friends, what we want from social interactions. We can set different boundaries. We can have different interests, different common experiences. It's all part of this human life.
So we're going to talk about different types of people for the first part. And there's two categories. So you have an introvert and an extrovert. These can overlap, so you'll find different characteristics of you in both.
So an extrovert is someone who will thrive in group situations, usually gather in larger circle of friends or just collectively have a larger number of friends. These people are usually really quite good at entertaining a group. They're good hosts. They seem to be able to charm everyone. A lot of the time, they can seem quite unafraid of risk, and especially social risk. They can put out some quite risky conversation topics and things like that. They're not afraid to kind of push those social boundaries to see kind of where they are. They usually seem to be very in tune with people's social needs and can sometimes bridge gaps or communication barriers with introverted people and kind of bring them into the group, like pull them in with, you know, things that they like and things. Sometimes they can crave social interaction and be quite unhappy when they're alone. You know, some of the people can fill up all their time with social interaction as a distraction from some of the issues that they're going through. Like some of the biggest extroverts on the surface, like Robin Williams, for example, if you hear him in interviews, he's a different character to what he can be in real life. You know, so he could be really happy, but then when the lights are off and the party's over, sometimes he could suffer in silence. And like when it come out that he'd suffered from like extreme highs and then big crashes, people were like, well, I wouldn't have thought that. But it's just because people can act happy and like everything is well when they're just putting on a persona. So if this identifies with you, then maybe you could look into that.
Yeah. These people can burn themselves out quickly if they don't pace themselves with some of the opposite. Like if you can't be happy on your own, then there's probably something wrong when you go a bit deeper. And this can come out in people when they aren't in groups and get some time to relax on their own. They build their whole identity around their social groups. And when people are having a down day and there's no one about, they can find themselves lost. So there's definitely value in taking some time in learning to do what makes you happy in that alone time.
Yeah, definitely. Like me, I thrive in a group situation. I feed off people and I bounce off their emotions, I bounce off their banter, have conversations and build on other people's stories, being really interested in what people have to say and listen to people finish in the part of their conversation when other people lose interest or get interrupted, because I've been that person in the past. Like, you're still speaking and everyone's just gone on to another subject. For that person to actually just listen to what you've got to say to end the conversation, it's just common courtesy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I can empathise with people in these social situations. Like, I like playing in bands. I could probably learn to do solo things, but I think that'd bore me. I like to share the experience with someone else, but that depends on my mood, and sometimes I can be the opposite. I can have the urge to take a night to myself, and since lockdown, I'm not being funny to Fran here, but I've craved this a lot. So, like, when there's an opportunity for me to spend some alone time, then I'll do it. Like, I don't know if anyone else can relate to that. Like, I feel myself going to work just to get away from having Fran around me 24/7. As much as you like someone, working on stuff with them, like the podcast, and then living with them, can be very quite taxing on the relationship. It can be quite hard on it. Like, that time of me going to work at a base is our space, and distance, those feelings of missing each other, can be what we need to experience too. As a contrast, we all have that in our life at times, I think. I have one friend where me and her can go months without seeing each other. We know we're in each other's lives, and if we called on each other, we'd be there for each other. Like, we text every now and again, but even that's kind of, not all the time. We don't need to be in each other's pockets to maintain the friendship. And when we do see each other, it's great. We can catch up on where each other's life is going, and it's as if we'd never been away at that point. But yeah, I weren't always an extrovert. I had to learn it. And at one point in my life, I was very introvert. Like, I'd say I'd probably come across as arrogant at one point, like a bit of a hipster. Like, I've always been into like truth seeking or alternative thought, where like not really going with the herd or going with the crowd. I've always looked at the world differently, so anyone who never bought into that way of thinking, I wouldn't even bother with. But that's a very niche group, and a lot of the time I was closing myself off to a lot of social situations. Like, personally, I'd want to know what the last album you listened to or the last book you read than what car you drive or what football match you watched. And although I'll gravitate to people with a common interest even now, but at that point, I would only speak to people who I had a common interest with, or the way they dressed. Like, if they weren't a goth or a punk or in a band t-shirt, then I'd have nothing in common with you. And if you were a normal average Joe on the street, I wouldn't even kind of speak to you, because I was really quite judgy like that. I think, like, looking back on it, I suffered from real social anxiety. People who've known me for a long time will say, no, you didn't, or sometimes they might probably view me differently. A lot of the time I use alcohol to open me up in those situations and make me feel less anxious. I put myself in really challenging situations a lot of the time. Like, I'd stand on the stage, like playing to hundreds of people in bands, and really get a buzz off that, and get a buzz off that energy of you entertaining the crowd. But coming off stage and speaking to someone one-on-one had me cringing, because I didn't believe what I had to say meant anything. Like, a lot of the times, I always needed to play a script in my head, and when it would come out, people would have moved on from the conversation. Some people butt in, and that's my train of thought or thread gone then. So I'd sit in a corner, drinking beer, getting really drunk and having a really boring time. and sometimes got quite angry at people having a good time. So I decided to learn and digest so much information about social cues, social interactions, and things to do or say to get a certain reaction from someone, to open up the conversation. And it would work up to a point. Most of it was like coming from cheesy pickup artists, and a lot of them were coming from quite a manipulative way of talking to people, because they felt angry at the world and wanted other people to suffer the way that they did. Most of the times it was covering up for their bad personalities. And yeah, it got me out there speaking to people, but gimmicky canned routines are just manipulative. Like, when those routines are over, or you don't have a big repertoire of canned routines for every social situation, then you can find yourself becoming unstuck really quickly. And the thing is, with a natural conversation, you need to take a genuine interest in what someone has to say, because they're expressing themselves to you, and to have a conversation, that means something to both of you. Like, there's no point in having a conversation to someone if you're not going to actually connect, because there's no point really. Well, what are you having that conversation for? People usually struggle with the first thing to say to people, and that's how a lot of people can get stuck with these routines and things like that, because it's hard approaching someone that you don't know. So if you were to say something like "hey" or "hello," then there's absolutely nowhere to go from that unless you have something else prepared. So just pointing out something in the environment, something topical, that can be an icebreaker. It can let you both know that you're both having the same experience and you've both kind of noticed the same thing, and kind of put it out there and have a bit of small talk about it. After the small talk, then you can go a bit deeper, but you have to be socially aware. And the only way to do that is to have more and more of these conversations, more and more of these social interactions, like starting small, such as even just looking at someone, making a bit more eye contact with them in the street will give you more confidence to do that. So just take baby steps, like...
Or talking about the weather.
Yeah, the weather is a really good conversation starter. It's a boring thing, especially in Britain, like, because the weather is just so unpredictable. Like in April, you've got it snowing, hailing, sunny, rainy, windy, all in the same day. Well, all in the same couple of minutes. But yeah, just saying those really short interactions can just get you warmed up for having proper conversations with people that you don't know. But it's such a difficult thing as like an adult, when your whole life you've had it drummed into you saying say no, or kind of say no to strangers, stay away from strangers, and you've got yourself kind of programmed like that, and now the only thing you want to do is speak to, like, open people up and speak to strangers, because that's how you're gonna open yourself up to more social situations.
That's how you make friends, ultimately, isn't it?
Yeah. So I just think being genuine in someone's interests or passions, like just asking them like what you're interested in, and then whatever they say, just try and take a genuine interest, maybe ask them more questions, or maybe like empathize with them, trying to get into their head, try and feel what they're feeling. Like maybe saying, I bet the harp can be quite a good stress reliever, can't it? Because, it's such a expressive thing, like trying to, they're obviously a creative person, so you've got more to go with. If you break down their characteristics, just think about what person they must be to be playing the guitar or being an artist or something like that. I spoke earlier about extroverts, like being able to pull people in and kind of helping bringing down them social barriers that you might have. And games can be, like games nights can be really good at breaking down them social barriers because you're all experiencing the same sort of thing. So there's a game we played the other day with a few mates called Taboo. It's such a simple game. You get a card with a word on that someone has to guess what it is by you describing it, but there's a list of words that are taboo or that you can't say to describe it. You have to swap the groups around so it's social that way. Gets the social juices flowing and opens people up, doesn't it? Like, Fran gets quite sensitive about public embarrassments, but it opened you up, didn't it, Fran?
Yeah, it's one of my biggest fears, having people laugh at something I've done or said. So when our friends got this game out, my heart sank inside because I didn't want to play it. I was too scared. I would embarrass myself.
The first few goes, it's quite awkward, isn't it? But sometimes you can say funny things when you're guessing.
Yeah.
And sometimes putting yourself in that vulnerable, uncomfortable situation to get most from a social group, don't you?
Yeah, well, it definitely worked for me. If I'd have said no, I don't want to play, I would have lost all that social interaction and bonding time. You know, it could have made me look quite rude or antisocial, which wouldn't have been the reason why I said no, it would have been because of my fears. But not everybody knows the ins and outs of your mind. I'm not necessarily saying you should do something you don't want to do, but when you put yourself through that uncomfortable situation, that's often when the growth happens. So not only did that game help me to feel more comfortable, with that sort of game and social interaction, it helped me to learn to deal with being embarrassed when saying something stupid. It helped me to laugh about it instead of getting upset and angry, which, I would have done before. But it's also enhanced my friendship because I made the effort to participate in a task or a game that my friends and my boyfriend wanted to play.
Yeah. Obviously, don't compromise something that you wouldn't normally do, kind of like that you would say a hard no to. But things such as nerves or things like that can just mean getting over a social barrier to know that we shouldn't take life too seriously. Like, we can loosen up in certain situations where any other time we could be closed off to. It can open doors that we wouldn't have had otherwise. We can push ourselves through uncomfortable situations. People are going to laugh at me now, especially my friends. Like, you'll find out I can go back to the start of civilizations at times throughout these conversations, like talking about lions and tigers and caveman times and stuff like that. The ones that are listening are probably cracking up because I subject them to this too. So social interaction, like, it must have been a very high pressure thing when it first came about. Like, imagine living in a tiny civilization. The way you act is going to kind of define your role for probably your whole life in that social group. You could probably rise if you challenge someone, but that would probably mean a fight to the death or something. Like, say if I went up to a girl and said something stupid or socially awkward, she could get weirded out and then go and tell her friends about it. You don't find a mate and you don't get to pass your genes on. End of the bloodline. Or maybe I went and said the wrong thing to one of the guys and everybody took offence to it. Then they could probably send out a lynch mob and probably club you to death or outcast you. So your life would be endangered by social interaction, and our bodies and minds don't forget this. They have like a genetic memory. These are deep-rooted fears that we've had for a long time. That's why I say we're kind of outdated machines a lot of the time. This is why we get nervous before social interactions and the adrenaline starts pumping. Although our lives are not at stake anymore and our ability to mate isn't being threatened, because there's always someone out there for someone now. There are enough people on the earth to go outside your social groups, and we're a lot more socially mobile than we used to be. And it's not socially acceptable to barbarically kill someone over coffee unless you're in a TV soap or something. Like most of the time, when we fight through this anxiety, then most of the time it can become really positive on the other side of that. Like most of the time I overcome nerves or do or say something, then it can lead to really good experiences. Like that feeling of when you're about to go on a roller coaster and you look up at like how high it is. That feeling is just there to tell you, well, this could go wrong at some point. That feeling's there to remind you, oh, this could go wrong. But most of the time, that feeling makes you just stop for a minute and evaluate things. Like giving us that feeling of coming out of our head and centering ourselves in our body. Like the only way to get rid of that is to either breathe through it or just dive in at the deep end and hoping you can swim,
Yeah, the more you expose yourself to these situations, the easier it can become, at just taking that leap and going for it.
Yeah, taking the leap of faith.
Yeah.
Right, I've babbled on long enough about extrovert, so let's speak about introvert. Can you tell me what an introvert is, Fran?
I can indeed. An introvert is usually someone who enjoys their own company, more than socialising with other people or in groups, and don't go out their way to seek attention, all them social engagements. An introvert is often quiet and reserved and thoughtful, spending time focusing on themselves. That's an aspect of life which is really crucial for an introvert, for them to be able to maintain their health and well-being.
Yeah.
I definitely think I fit the introvert category, although I'd be lying if I said I'd rather sit on my own than sit with Carl the majority of the time. But I don't crave social interaction in the same way as Carl. I have 2 close friends and some more casual friends that I talk to every now and again, compared to Carl, whose phone never stops beeping with messages for people in his bands, old friends, new friends, colleagues, old colleagues. It's not often someone messages me for a chat. And if someone does, it's usually one of 2 or 3 people. And that's just a reflection of my personality. Because I'm much more introverted, I have a smaller circle of friends than Carl.
Yeah, that's the difference between me and Fran. It's like, she'll hate it when my phone's like always going. And I'll say to her, why don't you go out with some friends today? We're complete opposites, but I'm sure that works a lot of the time in relationships.
They say opposites attract, don't they?
Yeah.
I mean, I do have a large family, but I'm comforted by knowing they're safe and alive. I dread family gatherings because I find it stressful having so many people in one room together. It's not enjoyable for me the majority of the time. I need time to sit in silence and chill after these meetups. I'm glad when they all go. And that's not because I love them any less. But again, it's my personality and the traits of me being an introvert. I find busy places much more overwhelming and harder to cope with. Until I'd met Carl, I think I'd only ever been in a pub for a wedding or a christening or something like that.
Yeah, you'd never even had a drink before, had you?
No, well, I tried a bit of red wine when I was younger at church once, and that was it. The only things that ever tempts me to be in a crowd is to go watch the football or to, go to a music gig. And even then, you only really have to talk with the person who you go with, and that's normally Carl or my dad when I go to the football. And there's nothing wrong with being an introvert, but it can be useful to know your limitations and to make sure you push them sometimes. With me, if I don't do something regularly to build up confidence, then I find it just restricts me. So, for example, if I don't go to the town centre every now and again, I find myself not wanting to go due to, anxiety.
Yeah, it can. This is sometimes what can make you agoraphobic. Like if you avoid those situations all the time, then it can become quite negative, can't it? It can actually have a negative impact on your life.
Yeah, especially when social interaction doesn't really come naturally for me. I find it hard to make friends. But if I don't put myself into these social situations and practice, nothing will ever get done and I won't progress in life. Social interaction is essential for daily life, But for me as an introvert, I'd find it draining.
Yeah.
But it would be boring if it was all the same, eh, Carl?
Yeah. That's what makes us unique, is our differences, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
it's important to have different qualities. And that's why we complement each other so well, Fran, I think.
Yeah.
I've inspired and helped you to step out of your comfort zone and, do things that you never thought you would, or so you say anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm not blowing my own trumpet. But you've helped me to become content with what I have, so I don't feel the need to kind of go out and socialise just to be happy. Although I still need that, I'm more content now. Like, I would have to fill up like all of my time. Like, going back to what I said earlier, like, I definitely did have those times where every single minute of the day was cramming something into it just to kind of distract myself from my own problems,
Yeah, when I first met you, you'd go out to your friends about 5 times a week. Well, which there's nothing wrong with that. But now you're much more content with just doing things on your own sometimes. And as you said, you do go upstairs to try and get away from me every now and again and spend that time on your own to distress, whereas you didn't really do that when I first met you, I don't think. Not so much.
Yeah, but like, if you think about it, I'd been single for a while, and you kind of, when you are not in a relationship, like, there's a lot of empty time that an empty kind of place in your diary that you do fit with friends.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that can be hard for friends to kind of adjust to.
Yeah, you've got to share them, haven't you?
Yeah, it can be difficult, like, finding the balance between, the time you used to spend with people and being in a relationship. But you've been through it yourself. Like, someone can go into a relationship and then completely ditch their friends completely, can't they?
Yeah, I know. I've experienced that.
Yeah, but
from a few friends.
I know, and that's okay if you want to end those social friendships and things like that, but you shouldn't. Getting into a relationship shouldn't consume you, should it? It should be like,
it's just another aspect of your life, isn't
Yeah.
it? That you fit in.
Yeah.
It's quite common, obviously. When you get into a relationship, the amount time you spend with your friends will naturally reduce, but it shouldn't disappear completely.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They've been there for you for a long time.
Yeah.
So you still need to make some time with them in some way, shape or form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Like, that's what hurts, when people do kind of just let you go once they've been in a relationship, because that means that they kind of using you then, because just using you for that type of filling that gap, or just being codependent on someone.
I do think that's what it feels like. I don't think that's always the intention. It is quite easy when you get in a new relationship to completely be utterly distracted and not have a consideration in the world for anybody else, because you're so consumed with what this new positive change in your life.
Yeah.
But it does make you feel that way, doesn't it?
I think at the start, when you've got like loads of it, like adrenaline, loads of endorphins, loads of different chemicals that a relationship gives you, that love gives you, that your friends couldn't, and you want to feel that more. But kind of after all them things kind of die down, I think at that point you should kind of try and reevaluate where they fit into your life and make time for them, because you need them friendships. Sometimes relationships, they're don't go the way you want them to, and then friends will always be there for you.
Yeah. I just wanted to really quickly mention a few different types of social interaction, just because I think it's interesting. Apparently, the most common types are exchange, competition, conflict, cooperation, and accommodation. So just to touch on them really quickly, exchange of, social interactions, competition between people, conflict and disagreement, cooperating with people and working together, and accommodation, which means having a balance between cooperation and conflict, where you give or take to achieve the middle ground. And I guess that's probably what you need the most in a band. A little bit of that accommodation.
Yeah. I just think it's a male thing, isn't it, to try and get your point across. It's a very
Yeah, I want to point out that all Carl's bandmates are male.
it's a very like, even if you don't want to come across as like
Pushy?
yeah, you need to at least stand your ground with things that you think should happen. But then when there's an equal number of people, it can be quite hard to find that middle ground. When you've got 5, that's perfect, because you can do a majority vote there, and someone's always going to get outvoted, but democracy rules, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you found that as interesting as me, but I just thought it was quite interesting, them,
Yeah, no, definitely. I think a lot of people can get quite carried away with the conflict and disagreement thing, and sometimes they can just end relationships because they're not getting kind of their own way at a lot of points, and everything is about compromise. Like you're a different person to the person that you're socialising with, aren't you?
Yeah, and this leads on well, Carl, to the next part where we discuss relationships. A massive part of our social interaction is trying to form, or maintain relationships with our friends, family, work colleagues, our girlfriend or our boyfriend, and many, many more. But do we actually know the characteristics of a healthy relationship? Are all of our relationships healthy? If not, is this our doing? Do we need to change? Is this relationship worth fighting for?
There are a few characteristics to having a healthy relationship, so we're only going to mention a few of them now. So one of them is mutual respect. Each person should value the other and understand their boundaries. Trust. Each person should be able to trust each other completely. Honesty. Each person should be honest to each other. This helps to build up trust. Compromise. Each person should acknowledge each other's point of view and be willing to give and take. Good communication. Each person should be able to speak openly and honestly to each other about aspects of their relationship. And understanding. Each person should take time to try to understand how the other might be feeling.
So in contrast, we're now going to mention some of the characteristics of an unhealthy relationship. So control. If one person makes a lot of the decisions and tells the other person what to do, sets them rules. Dishonesty. One or both persons lies or keeps information from the other, or steals from the other. Disrespect. One or both persons makes fun of the opinions or interests of the other person, or destroys something belonging to the other.
Yeah, that one makes fun. You've got to keep it in context with kind of, if it's humorous and it's done jokingly, and if it's done in jest.
But if it's on your insecurities, that's a bit different. That's damaging then, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely not. You don't want to ridicule the other person.
No. The next one, dependence. So one or both persons feel that, they couldn't live without the other. And the last one, abuse. Physical, domestic violence, sexual, emotional, financial, or discriminatory.
We thought we'd put that one in because We owe no one anything, and we do not need to stay in a relationship for the sake of it. For example, it can be difficult to end a relationship with a family member as they are blood, but if they're not giving you any value or joy or making your life better, we don't have to socialise with them if we don't want to. We feel like there's an expectation to maintain relationships with family simply because they're family. And yeah, I think we do forgive more and give family more chances, but ultimately it's our choice and we have control over who we socialise with, don't we?
Yeah. I mean, I know everybody's situation is different, and it's not just as easy to walk away from any form of relationship. But if you have identified that one or more of your relationships are unhealthy, then it's worth thinking about whether the relationship is worth saving or not. And if it's not, which is the best, most appropriate or safest way of trying to end the relationship. I think it's important to quickly touch on hostile relationships. Now, it can be extremely difficult to leave these relationships, but there is support that you can access for help in breaking down the relationship.
Everyone has different characteristics in a relationship, and I think it can be useful to assess what qualities we possess. Being self-aware has so many benefits. It allows you to consider your faults in the relationship and reflect on what you can do to work on your negatives.
Yeah, for me personally, I've always been very self-aware, in any kind of relationship. And I'm very good at deciding if it's healthy and beneficial for me. And if it's not, I distance myself. I'm definitely of the mindset that I only want people in my life that make me happy and bring me joy. I know nobody's perfect, but if the bad, and the annoyance becomes greater than the good that they bring you and to your life, then what's the point? But I am also irritable, and people annoy me easily. I sometimes wonder if my expectations are too high, but I don't find it easy to give the benefit of the doubt. And I do hold a grudge. So these are things that I've been trying to work on recently to ensure that if any of my relationships break down, I've done everything I can to do, to try and maintain the relationship. Whereas I think Carl is the opposite. He'll go out of his way to keep the peace and will try really hard to maintain a relationship for as long as possible until there's just no way forward. Would you agree with me there, Carl?
Yeah, I am. And I think it's changed over the last few years. And it's okay to remember that you don't have to just end a relationship completely, like end a friendship, or, you can take a break from them people to assess what's going on. And sometimes you'll think of something and you'll think, oh, that was a good memory. I kind of miss that person. And sometimes, it doesn't need to be a broken down relationship. Sometimes you just need some space from someone, don't you?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that just because you're annoyed with someone or if you're a bit cheesed off with what they said, that you have to break down that relationship straight away. Sometimes, like when someone says, oh, I'm going to make a complaint about this, sometimes they just have to sit down and reflect, and sometimes they'll just rip that complaint procedure and put it in the bin.
Yeah, I think that's what you're good at, though, that I'm not. I'm very quick with making my decisions. If somebody really annoys me, I'm quite quick to evaluate whether I think it's beneficial or not, and I think recently I have realised that, just because it might not be beneficial in that moment, it doesn't mean it won't be beneficial in a couple of months' time, rather than never speaking to them again.
Yeah. You've done that, haven't you? You've kind of reassessed people's relationships and then thought, oh my God, that was so silly at that point to kind of...
I have recently.
Ruin that relationship and not have kind of that person in your life just because something they said or did.
Yeah, but that's something that they said or did has definitely changed the relationship. It's closed off a section of the relationship and, made me realise, if I've got this need, I don't go to them. But
yeah.
there's still value in that relationship, and that is something that I have learned and been, still trying to learn
Yeah, but
going
that's
forward.
yeah, but that's sometimes where being open and honest with someone in that relationship is kind of where the where it becomes place for growth. Sometimes, like you're kind of forgot what I was going to say here, but if say if someone says to you, "Please don't say that," or you're being a bit of an idiot there, then sometimes that can make you reevaluate yourself and think, "Oh yeah, I was," and I think sometimes you can push your luck with your friends. Sometimes you can push your luck with relationships and like go a bit too far, and kind of that's sometimes where the boundaries. That's sometimes where you find the boundaries, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's definitely good to be honest with people, because if you have that honest conversation and say, "Look here, you've upset me. Look here, I don't agree with that. That doesn't resonate with me." If they're not willing to accommodate, they're not willing to compromise and adapt the relationship, then at least you did everything you could to try and maintain it. And if then it's sort of if they choose not to be receptive to that, that's sort of on them then, isn't it? Not on you.
Yeah.
So I think you've done the right thing by being honest. If they take that in a bad way and can't handle it, that's their fault, not yours.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you've got to. It's give and take, isn't it?
Yeah.
In relationships,
Yeah.
you
Any
can't.
sort of relationship or friendship.
Yeah, you don't. You shouldn't just blame yourself because it was a two-way thing.
Yeah.
I think that it just comes back to a lot of the techniques we've been speaking to before, like self-compassion and things like that. Like, if you've done something wrong or if you've done something bad, own it and kind of say, all right then, sorry, I overstepped the line. And, I think a lot of relationships will be a bit more stronger if you can get through them sort of bad patches. We've been there and we've come out the other side. Sometimes it can really make you a lot stronger.
Yeah. Yeah, just own it. Own your mistakes, own your thoughts, own your feelings. Be open and honest. And display all them good characteristics, of a healthy relationship. And if it breaks down, you've done all you can.
Yeah,
You've
definitely.
done all you can.
Yeah. I think we could go on about this all day. Yeah, went off on a bit of a tangent there, but I'd say I'm flexible with my boundaries, and different boundaries can be set in different groups. Like, I've got about 6 different social groups that I'm part of, and a few more kind of one-on-one social relationships. I play a different role in every one of them, and I won't be a different person, but there are different expectations, different goals, different wants and needs. Like, I wouldn't talk to one set of people about politics or religion anymore because boundaries have been set and we don't agree on certain things. But it is a two-way thing. So, like, if I was to say I'm not going to socialise with that group because we don't agree on this and that, then I'd be cutting myself off from that and the opportunities that it gives me. And sometimes, I just won't say that in this certain group. But also, when you put another person into the groups, the dynamics can shift and your roles can shift with that. Like, that's why, although it would be cool to get them all in a room together, like all of my friends at a birthday party or something, to see how many friends we've got, or something like that, it'd be quite cool. But mixing friendship groups like in a kind of formal way is not always the best idea, is it?
It's a risky move. It is a risky move.
Because being that person in the background when people are talking all these inside jokes and reminiscing on things that they've done that you can't relate to, that just sucks, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's always a bit of competition to be the best friend, to be the best social group. And your friends never like each other. whether they feel competitive or not, deep down, there always is.
Yeah, that I'm his best friend, but that's why I never call anyone my best friend. That's kind of, everyone feels left out, like, say, the really old tradition of having a best man. It's just kind of, oh well, why aren't I the best man? What have they done that I haven't? That's the thing with having a big social group. Like, you're just open to that if you put it out there. But sometimes I just find it hard to juggle all those friendship groups. 3 bands, jamming with other people, ghost hunting, working in a full-time job, having a relationship, having a family life. It could be overwhelming.
Well, I can only imagine, it's just me, my 2 friends, my
Your
mum and dad,
colouring.
and my colouring book, and my laptop. That's all I got to juggle.
Well, that's just what you want to do, isn't it? And kind of, I have so many goals that I want to do, so many things that I want to achieve, and like, there's just not enough time in the day to do it. And putting my heart and soul into all of that can just become completely exhausting, Yeah, I won't go on too much. I think social structures and relationships are so complex.
Yeah.
And
So personal as well, aren't they?
yeah, we could speak about this all day, but we'll let you get off and enjoy your new lease of freedom. Bring on the summer.
Woohoo!
So for next week, we're going to do a question and answer about the funny things people have done throughout lockdown and throughout this pandemic. Maybe it's a habit that you picked up or just something random. We want to address lockdown, but we want to make it fun and light-hearted. So in the comment section, or you can message us if you want it to be left anonymous. We'd just like to remain positive throughout this lockdown, throughout this roadmap period. And although it's been negative for a lot of people, there has been a lot of good that has come out of it as well, hasn't there? There's been quite a bit of bit more of a social spirit, a bit more of a kind of community spirit, hasn't
Yeah,
there?
more appreciation for the little things that we have now and that we'll be able to do as lockdown eases. So yeah, let us know, what you've been doing, what your thoughts have been, and anything positive, anything happy. We'd love to hear it.
Thank you.
See ya.
Thank you for listening, and if this information was valuable to you, or you think it might be for somebody else, then like, comment or share. To get more of this content, hit that subscribe button, and if you're watching on YouTube, ring that bell. It'll notify you every time we upload.
Check out our weekly blog at mind-fruit.co.uk. We hope to see you next week for Wellbeing Wednesday.